He was a self-made millionaire with a world at his feet. She was his devoted pregnant wife, the anchor to his whirlwind life. Their love story was a fairy tale splashed across society pages, but overnight the fairy tale shattered. He traded her for a younger model, leaving her pregnant and penniless, convinced his power and money made him untouchable. He thought he could erase her, but he severely underestimated the woman he'd scorned. What happens when a woman with nothing left to lose decides to fight back? This is the unbelievable true-to-life story of how one woman took on a titan, and one culminating in a jaw-dropping courtroom verdict that nobody saw coming. Catherine Davenport believed she was living a life most women only dreamed of. At 28, she was the wife of Michael Davenport, a charismatic tech mogul whose rise in the cutthroat world of Silicon Valley was the stuff of legend. Theirs was a romance that had captivated the Bay Area's elite, the brilliant, driven entrepreneur, and the beautiful, intelligent art historian who had grounded him. They lived in a sprawling Atherton mansion, a modern marvel of glass and steel that boasted panoramic views of the Santa Cruz Mountains. The house, which Michael had named Olympus, was a testament to his success. It had an infinity pool that seemed to spill into the horizon, a home theater that rivaled any commercial cinema, and a garage filled with a rotating collection of European sports cars. Their life was a meticulously curated series of triumphs, lavish charity galas, where Catherine, draped in designer gowns, would charm potential investors with her knowledge of Renaissance art. Spontaneous weekend trips to their private vineyard in Napa Valley. Intimate dinner parties where the guest list was a who's who of tech billionaires, venture capitalists, and the occasional celebrity. Michael, with his sharp blue eyes and a smile that could disarm the most hardened negotiator, was the sun around which their universe revolved. He had built his company, Nexus Dynamics, from a garage startup into a global powerhouse in artificial intelligence. He was hailed as a visionary, a maverick, a modern-day titan of industry. To the world, he was brilliant and benevolent. To Catherine, he was simply Mikey, the man who would hum off key while making her pancakes on Sunday mornings, the man whose head she would stroke as he fell asleep, exhausted from another 80-hour work week. She had met him 7 years prior. Catherine was finishing her master's degree at Stanford, working part-time as a curator's assistant at the Cantor Arts Center. He had come in to discuss the potential for a tech art collaboration. He was electric, his mind moving at a speed she found both dizzying and exhilarating. He listened, truly listened to her passionate discourse on the Florentine school, his gaze intense and unwavering. He pursued her with the same relentless focus he applied to his business dealings. Within a year, they were married. Catherine had willingly stepped back from her own career ambitions. Michael had insisted. "You're my partner in life, Kate," he'd said, his voice laced with earnestness. I need you to build our home, our sanctuary. You'll be the soul of this family, the one who makes all this steel and glass feel like a home." It was a seductive proposition. She loved him, and the life he offered was dazzling. She became the perfect corporate wife, an extension of his brand. She planned the parties, managed their multiple properties, and cultivated a social circle that was advantageous to his business. She told herself she was happy, and for a long time, she was. The first hairline cracks in their perfect facade began to appear so subtly that Catherine almost didn't notice them. It started with the late nights at the office, becoming later the business trips more frequent and longer. When he was home, he was distant, his mind clearly elsewhere. The easy laughter that had once filled their cavernous home was replaced by a tense silence, broken only by the incessant pinging of his phone. He would take calls at all hours, walking into another room and lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's just pressure, Kate," he'd say, brushing off her concerns with a wave of his hand. "We're on the verge of the biggest deal in the company's history. Project Chimera. It's going to change everything." He spoke of it with a feverish excitement, a passion that was once reserved for her. Then came Isabella Rossi. She arrived at Nexus Dynamics as part of their elite internship program, a 22-year-old recent graduate from MIT with a razor-sharp mind and an ambition that mirrored Michael's own. Catherine first met her at the company's summer picnic, an extravagant affair held on the great lawn of their estate. Isabella was strikingly beautiful, with cascading dark hair, olive skin, and large, expressive brown eyes that seemed to drink in everything around her. She was introduced to Catherine as Michael's new protégé. "Catherine, this is Isabella Rossi, an absolute genius. She's going to be instrumental in Project Chimera." Michael had announced, his hand resting a little too long on the small of Isabella's back. Catherine, ever the gracious hostess, extended her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Isabella. Michael has told me so much about the brilliant new minds at Nexus." "The pleasure is all mine, Mrs. Davenport," Isabella had replied, her voice smooth as silk. Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct, and in her eyes, Catherine saw a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't just admiration for her husband, it was a cool, appraising confidence that felt unnervingly proprietary. Over the next few months, Isabella's name became a constant refrain in their lives. It was Isabella's insight solved the coding problem. Isabella has this incredible idea for market penetration. Isabella is working late with me tonight to prep for the Tokyo investors. She was no longer just an intern. She was his right hand, his confidant. He bought her a new Tesla as a performance bonus. He took her along on business trips while Catherine was left at home to manage the renovations on their Aspen ski lodge. Catherine tried to suppress the growing knot of dread in her stomach. She was not a jealous woman, she told herself. Michael was a demanding boss, and he recognized talent. She was being paranoid, but the signs were becoming impossible to ignore. The scent of a floral perfume, not her own, clinging to his suit jackets. The hushed, late-night phone calls that would abruptly end the moment she entered the room. The emotional and physical chasm that had opened up between them, a vast, empty space in their king-sized bed. She confronted him one evening, her voice trembling slightly as she held up his phone, which had buzzed with a text from Isabella at 2 a.m. The message was simple: "Thinking of you." Michael snatched the phone from her hand, his face a mask of cold fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing going through my phone? Have you lost your mind?" "Who is she, Michael, really?" Catherine asked, tears welling in her eyes. "Why is she texting you in the middle of the night?" "She's my colleague, Catherine. We're under immense pressure. It was probably about the presentation for the London team." "You're being hysterical. I can't believe this. After everything I do for us, for this family, you accuse me of this." He turned the tables with practiced ease, his indignation so profound that for a moment she almost believed him. He was a master of gaslighting, of making her feel like the crazy one. He stormed out, saying he needed some air, and didn't return until dawn. The final brutal confirmation of her fears came not from a stray text or a whiff of perfume, but from a society blog. She was scrolling through her feed one morning, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands, when a photo made her heart stop. It was a paparazzi shot, taken outside a chic, discreet restaurant in San Francisco. Michael was walking out, his arm wrapped tightly around Isabella. He was leaning down to kiss her, a look of unguarded adoration on his face that Catherine hadn't seen directed at her in years. Isabella was laughing, her head thrown back in triumph. The caption was snarky and speculative. Tech titan Michael Davenport's newest asset. Looks like Project Chimera isn't the only new venture he's pouring his energy into. The world tilted on its axis. The air was sucked from her lungs. The screen of her tablet seemed to mock her, the smiling faces of her husband and his young lover, a grotesque parody of the life she thought she had. For several long minutes, Catherine sat frozen in her sun-drenched breakfast nook, the picture of domestic tranquility, while her meticulously constructed world crumbled into dust around her. The silence of the grand house was deafening. And in that moment of shattering clarity, another even more terrifying realization dawned on her. She was 6 weeks late. A home pregnancy test she had taken just 2 days before, the results of which she had been waiting for the perfect romantic moment to share, lay hidden in her bathroom drawer. It had been positive. She was pregnant with the child of a man who was not only a stranger to her now, but a man who had just publicly and humiliatingly betrayed her. The fairy tale was over. The nightmare had just begun. The days that followed the blog post were a blur of surreal, agonizing clarity. The digital image of Michael and Isabella was seared into Catherine's mind, a constant, looping horror film. Every corner of their sterile mansion, once a symbol of their shared success, now felt like a mausoleum, each opulent object a monument to a life that was a lie. The silence that had been creeping in for months now became a roaring, suffocating void. Michael came home that evening, not with an apology, but with a chilling, almost unnerving calm. He walked into the cavernous living room where Catherine sat, the tablet with the incriminating photo still on the coffee table in front of her. She hadn't moved it. She wanted him to see it, to be forced to confront the wreckage he had created. He didn't even glance at it. He loosened his tie, his movements precise and deliberate. "Catherine, we need to talk," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. It was the same tone he used when discussing quarterly earnings reports with his board. "Talk." Catherine's voice was a raw, broken whisper. "There's nothing to talk about, Michael. There's only this." She gestured numbly towards the tablet. He finally looked at the photo, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features, not of guilt, but of irritation at being caught so sloppily. "It's not what it looks like," he began. The classic insulting refrain of the unfaithful. "Don't." Catherine cut him off, a spark of anger finally piercing through her shock. "Please don't you dare insult my intelligence by lying to me now. Not after this." Michael sighed, a long, weary sound, as if she were an inconvenient problem that needed to be managed. He sat down in the armchair opposite her, creating a chasm of Italian leather and designer carpet between them. "All right," he said, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. "You're right. I haven't been fair to you. Isabella and I, we have a connection, a powerful one. It's on an intellectual and emotional level that, well, that you and I haven't had for a very long time." Each word was a carefully aimed dart designed to wound, to shift the blame. He painted their affair not as a sordid betrayal, but as the inevitable result of her own inadequacies. "Look, Kate, we've grown apart. It happens. You've been content to run the house, to plan parties. My world, the world of Nexus, is moving at light speed. Isabella is part of that world. She understands the pressure, the vision. She contributes to it." "She's a child, Michael," Catherine cried, the words tearing from her throat. She's 22. She has more drive and intellectual curiosity in her little finger than most people have in their entire bodies, he retorted, his voice hardening. Her age is irrelevant. Her mind is what matters. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He was systematically dismantling their shared history, recasting her role from a supportive partner to a decorative, uninteresting burden. He was making her feel obsolete. So that's it, she asked, her body trembling. 7 years of marriage, you just throw it away. I'm not throwing it away, he said, his voice taking on a magnanimous, patronizing tone. I will always care for you, Catherine. I'll make sure you're taken care of. I'll set you up with a very generous settlement. You'll be comfortable for the rest of your life. You won't have to worry about a thing. He spoke of their marriage as a business deal to be dissolved, a line item on his balance sheet. The generous settlement was presented not as her rightful share, but as a gift from his benevolent hand. The arrogance was staggering. He truly believed he could just by her silence pay her off to disappear quietly. It was then, in the face of his cold, clinical dismissal of their life together, that Catherine knew she had to tell him. The secret she had been holding close, a tiny spark of hope that had now become a terrifying complication, had to be brought into the light. Michael, she said, her voice shaking but firm. There's something else, something you need to know. He looked at her, a hint of impatience in his eyes, as if he had already mentally moved on from this conversation and was anxious to get to his real life, the one with Isabella. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air, seeming to alter the very density of the room. For the first time that evening, Michael's composure cracked. His face went pale, his jaw slackening in disbelief. He stared at her, his sharp blue eyes wide with something she couldn't read, shock, horror, fury. What? He choked out. I'm pregnant, she repeated, a tear finally escaping and tracing a hot path down her cheek. I'm about 9 weeks along. I was going to tell you this weekend. I wanted it to be special. The pathetic irony of her words twisted in her gut. Michael stood up and began to pace, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. He looked trapped, a wild animal caught in a snare. This was a variable he had not accounted for, a messy biological complication that couldn't be solved with a wire transfer. No, he said, shaking his head. No, that's not possible. It is possible, Michael. It's real. He stopped pacing and pointed an accusatory finger at her. Is it even mine? The question was a physical blow. Catherine flinched as if he had struck her. The sheer, unadulterated venom of it stole her breath. After all his betrayals, he had the audacity to question hers. The accusation was so vile, so far from the realm of who she was, that it momentarily stunned her into silence. How dare you? She finally whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of pain and rage. How dare you stand there after admitting you're sleeping with some girl from your office and accuse me of being unfaithful? But he wasn't listening. His mind was already spinning, calculating, strategizing. A baby. A baby tied him to her in a way a marriage certificate no longer did. It tied him to the past he was so eager to shed. It was a complication that could tarnish his public image, a messy detail in the narrative of the brilliant visionary. And it was a claim, a very powerful claim, on his fortune. His expression hardened, the brief flicker of shock replaced by a cold, reptilian resolve. He looked at her, not as the mother of his child, but as an adversary. I want a paternity test, he stated, his voice flat and hard as granite. Fine, Catherine shot back, her own anger now a roaring fire. "You'll have your test, but you need to understand something, Michael. This changes nothing about your affair." "Oh, it changes everything," he said, a cruel, thin smile playing on his lips. "It makes this entire situation much, much messier. And I don't like messy." He walked over to the bar and poured himself a whiskey, his hand surprisingly steady. "I think it's best if you leave, Catherine." "Leave?" She stared at him, incredulous. "This is my home." "It's my house," he corrected her, his voice dropping to a low, menacing register. "Every single thing in it, including the clothes on your back, was paid for by me. You came into this marriage with nothing but a student loan and a dusty art history degree. Don't forget that." He was casting her out, just like that. From the life she had helped him build, from the home she had painstakingly created. He was erasing her. "You can't just throw me out," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and defiance. "I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child." "Pack a bag," he said, his back to her, as he stared out the massive window at the twinkling lights of the valley below. "My driver will take you wherever you want to go. A hotel, a friend's place, I don't care. We'll have our lawyers talk. They can sort out the details, but as of tonight, you are no longer welcome in this house." The finality in his tone was absolute. There was no negotiation, no appeal. This was a corporate decision, an executive order. She was a redundant asset being liquidated. Numbly, Catherine rose to her feet. The fight had drained out of her, replaced by a chilling, profound sense of shock. She walked past him, up the grand, sweeping staircase to their bedroom suite. The room was filled with her things, with their shared memories. Photos of them on vacation, a painting she had bought for their first anniversary, the books she read at night. It all seemed to belong to another life, another woman. She packed a single suitcase, her hands moving mechanically. She took her wallet, her passport, a few changes of clothes, and the small velvet box that contained the jewelry her own grandmother had left her. She left behind the designer clothes, the expensive handbags, the diamond necklace Michael had given her for her last birthday. They were props from a play that had closed, costumes from a role she no longer played. As she walked down the stairs, Michael was still standing by the window, a dark silhouette against the glittering backdrop of his kingdom. He didn't turn around. He didn't say goodbye. He simply let her walk out of his life. The heavy front door clicked shut behind her, the sound echoing the final, brutal closing of a chapter. Outside, the cool night air hit her face. Michael's driver, a kind man named George, who had always been warm to her, stood by a black sedan, his face a study in pained sympathy. He opened the door for her without a word. As the car pulled away from Olympus, its gleaming facade receding in the darkness, Catherine looked back one last time. She saw a light flick on in an upstairs office, the one Michael used for his late-night work. She imagined him in there already on the phone, not with his lawyer, but with Isabella, telling her the obstacle had been removed. Slumped in the plush leather seat, a lone suitcase by her side, Catherine felt a wave of nausea and despair wash over her. She was 28 years old, pregnant, homeless, and married to a man who hated her. He had all the money, all the power, all the lawyers. She had nothing. He had left her for a younger woman and cast her aside like trash. The world saw him as a visionary genius. She now saw him for what he truly was, a monster. And as the car sped down the winding hill away from the gilded cage she had called home, a tiny, hard kernel of resolve began to form in the pit of her stomach. He thought she was nothing without him. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. The first few weeks after being cast out of her own life were a disorienting, humbling ordeal. Catherine found refuge with her oldest friend, Sarah Chen, a pediatric nurse who lived in a modest but welcoming two-bedroom apartment in San Mateo, a world away from the rarefied air of Atherton. The spare room was cluttered with Sarah's workout equipment and half-finished art projects, but to Catherine, it felt like a sanctuary. Sarah, fiercely loyal and practical, was a grounding force in the swirling chaos of Catherine's life. When Catherine arrived on her doorstep, suitcase in hand, her face pale and tear-streaked, Sarah had simply wrapped her in a tight hug, no questions asked, and led her inside. It was only after a cup of chamomile tea and an entire box of tissues that Catherine managed to stammer out the whole sordid story, the affair, the public humiliation, the pregnancy, and Michael's brutal cold dismissal. That absolute bastard, Sarah had seethed, her usual calm demeanor replaced by a protective fury. That narcissistic, sociopathic bastard. Don't worry, Cat. We'll figure this out. You're not alone in this. And she wasn't. But the chasm between her old life and her new one was staggering. She woke up not to the panoramic views of the mountains, but to the sound of traffic on the El Camino Real. Her days, once filled with charity luncheons and gallery visits, were now spent on Sarah's comfortable but slightly lumpy sofa, staring at the ceiling and battling waves of morning sickness and despair. The nausea was relentless, a constant physical reminder of the unwanted, unholy trinity she was now a part of her Michael and Isabella. True to his word, Michael had completely cut her off. The joint credit cards were declined. Her access to their bank accounts was revoked. The first communication she received from him was not a phone call, not a text message asking if she was okay, but a sterile, chillingly formal email from his lawyer, a man from a top-tier San Francisco law firm known for its aggressive, take-no-prisoners approach to high-stakes divorce. The email stated that Mr. Davenport was officially filing for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. It also informed her that as a good-faith gesture, he was prepared to offer her a one-time lump sum payment of $500,000 contingent upon her signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement and agreeing to his terms regarding the unborn child. The email concluded by strongly advising her to seek her own legal counsel. $500,000. To a normal person, it was a fortune. To Michael, whose net worth was estimated to be in the high nine figures, it was less than a rounding error. It was the cost of one of his sports cars, a fraction of what he'd spent on their last vacation. It was an insult, a clear message of what he thought she was worth. The casual, dismissive reference to their baby as the unborn child made her physically ill. "He's trying to bully you, Cat," Sarah said, reading the email over her shoulder, her face tight with anger. "He thinks he can just throw some money at you and you'll crawl away quietly. You need a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a shark. Someone who won't be intimidated by Michael or his corporate goons." Finding a lawyer was a daunting prospect. Catherine had no money of her own. The small amount of cash in her wallet was dwindling rapidly. She had her grandmother's jewelry, but the thought of selling her last real connection to her family was heartbreaking. It was Sarah, through her network of hospital colleagues, who found a name: Jessica Morales, a family law attorney who had a reputation for being a fierce advocate for her clients, particularly women who were being railroaded by powerful husbands. She wasn't part of the glitzy San Francisco legal elite. Her office was in a modest building in Redwood City, but her track record was impressive. Her specialty was forensic accounting in divorce cases, uncovering hidden assets and financial deceit. Catherine secured a consultation. She walked into Jessica Morales' office, feeling small and intimidated. The office was neat and professional, but unpretentious. The walls were lined with law books and a few tasteful prints, not expensive original art. Jessica Morales was in her early 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes, a warm, reassuring smile, and an air of calm competence that immediately put Catherine at ease. She listened patiently as Catherine recounted her story, her expression a mixture of empathy and focused intensity. She took copious notes, her pen flying across a yellow legal pad. She didn't interrupt, she just listened, letting Catherine pour out all the pain, fear, and humiliation of the past few weeks. When Catherine finished, her voice hoarse, Jessica looked at her, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Catherine," she said, her voice firm but kind, "thank you for trusting me with this. First, I want you to take a deep breath. What Michael has done to you is appalling, on both a human and a legal level. His attempt to intimidate you with that insulting offer is a classic move of a wealthy, narcissistic spouse. He expects you to be scared, to feel powerless, and to take the scraps he throws from his table. We are not going to let that happen." For the first time in weeks, Catherine felt a glimmer of hope. "But how can I afford this?" Catherine asked the question that had been tormenting her. "I have no money. He's cut me off completely." Jessica smiled. "Don't you worry about that. In California, in a divorce proceeding like this, the court can, and almost always will, order the spouse with the financial resources to pay the legal fees for the spouse without. It's called a fee award. Michael is going to pay for me to fight him. He just doesn't know it yet." Jessica then laid out her initial strategy. "The first thing we need to do is file our response to his divorce petition. We will also file a request for order, asking the court for temporary spousal support, exclusive use of a vehicle, and most importantly, for him to advance your legal fees. We need to get you financially stable while this case is ongoing. He has a legal and moral obligation to support you and his unborn child, whether he likes it or not." He demanded a paternity test. Catherine said quietly, the shame of the accusation still stinging. "Let him," Jessica said, with a dismissive wave of her hand. "We'll agree to it. It will prove he is the father, which will only strengthen your position. It's a scare tactic meant to humiliate you. We won't be intimidated." Over the next week, Jessica and her small team worked swiftly. They filed the necessary paperwork with the court. A hearing was set. Michael's legal team responded with a barrage of motions and declarations, painting Catherine as a vindictive, gold-digging spouse who was trying to extort their client. They included declarations from several of Michael's employees, all attesting to his impeccable character and Catherine's supposed emotional instability in the final months of their marriage. It was a coordinated smear campaign designed to poison the well before the case even got started. The most painful part was the declaration from Isabella Rossi. In it, she portrayed herself as a victim of Catherine's unfounded jealousy and harassment. She described Catherine as a relic, a woman who couldn't keep up with Michael's intellect and dynamism. She painted their relationship as a pure meeting of minds, a love story for the modern age, and Catherine as the hysterical, scorned wife standing in the way of their happiness. The words were slick, polished, and full of corporate speak, but the venom was unmistakable. Michael had clearly had his PR team help her draft it. Reading it made Catherine want to curl up in a ball and disappear. But Jessica was unfazed. "It's all noise, Catherine," she said calmly during a late-night phone call. "It's ugly, and I'm sorry you have to read it, But it's just noise. The court has seen this 1,000 times. What they care about are facts and finances. And that, she added with a hint of steel in her voice, is where we're going to hit him. Jessica explained her long-term strategy. This wasn't just about getting a fair settlement. This was about uncovering the truth of Michael's financial empire. Men like Michael, she explained, don't just have a checking account and a 401k. They have intricate corporate structures, offshore accounts, shell corporations, and complex stock option plans. He thinks you don't know anything about that world. He thinks you were just the party planner. He's underestimated you, and that is his biggest mistake. Jessica told Catherine that her memory was their most valuable asset. I want you to write down everything you can remember about his business. Names of partners, investors, lawyers, accountants, trips he took, deals he mentioned, anything you overheard. No detail is too small. You were there for 7 years. You saw and heard more than you realize. You were the soul of the family. Remember, the soul sees everything. For the first time since she'd walked out of Olympus, Catherine felt a sense of purpose. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a key player in the fight for her own future and the future of her child. She bought a set of notebooks and began to write. She wrote for hours every day, dredging up memories from the past 7 years. A hushed conversation about a holding company in the Cayman Islands, the name of a private banker he met in Zurich, the strange way he structured the purchase of their Napa vineyard through a limited liability company she'd never heard of. As she wrote, the image of the perfect life she thought she'd lost was replaced by a more complex and much darker picture. She realized that while she was busy creating their sanctuary, he was busy creating a financial fortress designed not just to grow his wealth, but to protect it from everyone, including her. The initial court hearing for temporary support was a small but significant victory. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who seemed unimpressed by the 3-piece suits from Michael's law firm, ordered Michael to pay Catherine substantial monthly spousal support, cover her health insurance, provide her with a car, and most crushingly, for him to pay an initial retainer of $50,000 directly to Jessica Morales' law firm. Michael, who was required to be present, sat at the opposing table, his face a thunderous mask of disbelief. He shot Catherine a look of pure hatred across the courtroom. It was the first time she had seen him since the night he threw her out. He looked smaller, somehow less formidable, without the backdrop of his mansion and his entourage. Leaving the courthouse that day, Catherine felt a surge of adrenaline. It was a long way from over, but it was a start. The storm was just gathering, but for the first time, she felt like she might just be able to withstand it. She wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting for her dignity, for her identity, and for the child that was growing inside her. The battle had been joined. The initial court victory, while validating, was merely the opening skirmish in what was to become a long, brutal war of attrition. The period that followed, known in legal terms as discovery, was a grueling, invasive, and emotionally taxing process. It was a battle fought not in a courtroom, but through a relentless barrage of paperwork, depositions, and strategic maneuvering. Michael, enraged by the judge's temporary support order, unleashed the full might of his legal and financial arsenal, determined to grind Catherine down into submission. His lawyers buried Jessica's small office in an avalanche of paper. They filed endless frivolous motions. They sent over thousands of pages of financial documents that were deliberately disorganized and incomplete, a tactic designed to exhaust their resources and budget. They sent interrogatories, long lists of written questions that were deeply personal and humiliating, asking about her spending habits, her friendships, even her relationship with her parents, all in an attempt to paint her as unstable and profligate. Catherine, now visibly pregnant, spent her days in Jessica's conference room, sifting through mountains of bank statements, credit card bills, and corporate reports. It was a world she had been willfully ignorant of during her marriage, and now she was forced to become an expert in it. The work was tedious and emotionally draining. Every receipt for a lavish dinner with investors, every bill for a five-star hotel she'd never stayed at was a fresh reminder of the life he was living with Isabella, funded by the empire she had helped him build. The most galling discovery was the way he had used their joint funds for his affair. She found credit card statements with charges for jewelry from Tiffany & Co., pieces she had never received, bills from exclusive resorts he had claimed to be visiting for solo work retreats, charges for dinners at romantic, out-of-the-way restaurants on dates when he had told her he was working late at the office. Isabella Rossi's name wasn't on the statements, but the pattern was undeniable. He had been funding his double life with their money. "This is good for us, Catherine," Jessica would say, her voice calm and steady amidst Catherine's anger and tears. "This isn't just proof of his infidelity, it's proof of him breaching his fiduciary duty to you. In a community property state like California, that's a big deal. He was taking community assets and using them for his own personal benefit without your knowledge or consent. Judges do not like that." Jessica, in turn, was waging her own offensive. She hired a forensic accountant, a quiet, brilliant man named David Chen, no relation to Sarah, who specialized in untangling the complex financial webs of the ultra-wealthy. David was like a bloodhound on the trail of a scent. He and Jessica issued subpoenas for records from dozens of entities' banks in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands, shell corporations in Delaware, venture capital firms that had invested in Nexus and Michael's personal wealth managers. The resistance was fierce. Michael's lawyers fought every subpoena, claiming the information was proprietary, confidential, or irrelevant. But Jessica was relentless, arguing successfully in court time and again that as his wife, Catherine was entitled to a full accounting of the marital estate. Slowly, painstakingly, a picture began to emerge. It was a picture of breathtaking deceit. Michael hadn't just been hiding an affair, he had been systematically hiding money from her for years. David Chen discovered a network of offshore accounts and shell LLCs that Michael had set up shortly after Nexus Dynamics went public. He had been diverting millions of dollars in personal income and stock options into these entities, effectively creating a shadow fortune that was completely off the official books. He had undervalued company stock, backdated options, and created complex trusts, all designed to minimize his visible assets and shield his wealth from her in the event of a divorce. The Napa Vineyard, which Catherine had always believed they owned together, was actually held by a trust, of which the sole beneficiary was a corporation registered in the British Virgin Islands. Her name was nowhere on any of the paperwork. The Aspen Ski Lodge, the same. He had built a financial fortress, and she had been living in the guest house without ever realizing it. The centerpiece of his deception was Project Chimera. Catherine remembered him talking about it with a manic intensity. Publicly, it was presented as a new AI initiative within Nexus Dynamics. But the financial records revealed the truth. Project Chimera was a new, separate company that Michael had secretly founded. He had used Nexus resources, engineers, and intellectual property to build it, but had structured it so that he personally owned 100% of the equity. It was on the verge of launching and was valued by industry experts at over $200 million. He had, in effect, stolen the most valuable new asset from the company he shared with his stockholders and his wife and kept it for himself. "This is grand larceny on a corporate scale," David Chen had said during one of their strategy meetings, a rare note of excitement in his usually placid voice. "He's not just defrauding you, he's likely defrauding his own investors." While the financial battle raged, the personal attacks continued. Michael's legal team scheduled Catherine's deposition, a formal videotaped interview where they could question her under oath. It was held in the sterile, intimidating conference room of their downtown San Francisco office. Catherine, now 7 months pregnant, sat at a long, polished table facing 3 of Michael's lawyers, including the senior partner, a notoriously aggressive attorney named Marcus Thorne. Jessica sat beside her, a calm and reassuring presence. For 8 grueling hours, Thorne grilled her. He picked apart her life, her marriage, her role as a wife. He tried to portray her as lazy, unintelligent, and completely detached from her husband's business. "Mrs. Davenport," Thorne began, his voice dripping with condescension, "would it be fair to say that while your husband was working 18-hour days to build a billion-dollar company, your primary contributions were selecting floral arrangements and approving canapes for parties? My husband asked me to build a home and a life for us," Catherine replied, her voice steady, just as Jessica had coached her. "I supported him in every way I could so that he could focus on his work. We were a partnership." "A partnership?" Thorne scoffed. "Did you ever attend a board meeting? Did you ever read a financial prospectus? Do you even know what EBITDA stands for?" "I know what loyalty stands for, Mr. Thorne, and honesty. Perhaps you could ask Mr. Davenport to define those terms for you." The deposition was brutal, but Catherine held her own. She refused to be baited, refused to break down in tears despite the intense emotional strain. She answered every question calmly and truthfully. Her deep knowledge of Michael's life, the names she remembered, the trips, the dinner conversations, all the details she had written down in her notebooks, proved to be invaluable. She was not the clueless, decorative wife they tried to paint her as. She was intelligent, observant, and as they were beginning to realize, she had an excellent memory. The final straw for Michael was the paternity test. As Jessica had predicted, he insisted on it, and Catherine readily agreed. The result was, of course, unequivocal. There was a 99.999% probability that Michael Davenport was the biological father. The confirmation seemed to push him over the edge. Any pretense of a civilized divorce evaporated. He became obsessed with winning, with crushing her at any cost. He filed a motion seeking full custody of the unborn child, claiming Catherine was emotionally and financially unstable, and therefore an unfit mother. It was a move of such breathtaking cruelty that even Jessica was momentarily stunned. He didn't want the child. He wanted to use it as a weapon, a bargaining chip, to force her to accept his terms. That was Catherine's breaking point. The fear and hurt that had been her constant companions transformed into a cold, hard rage. He was not going to take her baby. He has no idea who he's dealing with, Catherine told Jessica, her voice low and fierce, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. He thinks this is a business negotiation. He thinks he can bully and intimidate and lie his way to a win. But this isn't about money anymore. This is about my child. He started a war he cannot possibly win. The battle lines were drawn. All attempts at settlement had failed. The case was heading for trial. It would be Michael Davenport, the tech visionary, against the pregnant wife he had abandoned. He had the money, the power, and a team of the most ruthless lawyers in the state. She had the truth, a brilliant and dedicated attorney, and the unshakable resolve of a mother protecting her child. The trenches had been dug. The final decisive battle was about to begin. The trial began on a crisp autumn morning, the San Mateo County courtroom buzzing with anticipation. The story had become a Bay Area sensation, and reporters packed the benches. Michael Davenport arrived flanked by his legal team, with Isabella Rossi positioning herself in the front row of the gallery, a calculated act of intimidation. Catherine entered with only her lawyer, Jessica Morales. Now nearly 9 months pregnant, her presence was a powerful, silent rebuttal to the narrative being spun against her. She met neither Michael's nor Isabella's gaze, her focus absolute. The Honorable Judge Elizabeth Chen, a formidable jurist known for her sharp intellect, presided. She was not a woman to be swayed by reputation or wealth. Michael's lead attorney, Marcus Thorne, opened with a condescending portrayal of his client as a long-suffering genius, trapped in a marriage with a woman who contributed nothing but now sought to claim his fortune. He painted Catherine as a vindictive opportunist, using her pregnancy to extort a man of vision. When Jessica Morales rose, the atmosphere shifted. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and strong. "This is not a case about a marriage that simply grew apart. This is a case about a systematic, calculated, and fraudulent campaign of deception." She methodically laid out their argument. "We will show you the documents. We will follow the money from a shared marital account in California to a secret holding company in the Cayman Islands. We will prove that Mr. Davenport did not just break his marriage vows, Your Honor. He broke the law." The first week was a masterclass in forensic accounting. Jessica and her expert David Chen presented a mountain of evidence that laid Michael's deceit bare. They used flowcharts and subpoenaed bank records from offshore havens to illustrate how Michael had created a shadow fortune. He had funneled millions in personal income and stock options into a web of shell corporations, all established shortly after his company, Nexus Dynamics, went public long before any supposed marital strife. The centerpiece of the fraud was Project Chimera. Jessica presented internal emails and testimony from a former engineer proving Michael had used community property Nexus resources, talent, and funds to secretly build an entirely new private company. He had effectively stolen the marital partnership's most valuable new asset, valued at over $200 million for himself. When Michael took the stand, his arrogance was his undoing. Under the gentle questioning of his own lawyer, he was the picture of confidence. But Jessica's cross-examination dismantled him. She began with a simple document. "Mr. Davenport," she said, holding a wire transfer confirmation, "this shows a $2 million transfer to an entity called Nautilus Holdings LLC. Can you tell the court what that is?" "It's a business entity," Michael answered coolly. "And where is it domiciled?" "I believe it's in Delaware," he said, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Let me refresh your memory," Jessica said, producing the incorporation document. "It states quite clearly it is registered in Grand Cayman. Is that your signature?" The color drained from Michael's face. He was caught in a bold-faced lie. "I have many entities," he stammered. "It's hard to keep track. And what asset does this holding company hold, Mr. Davenport?" Jessica pressed her voice like ice. "Does it, for example, hold the title to a certain vineyard in Napa Valley that your wife believed you owned together?" Michael stared at her, trapped. His lawyer's objection was swiftly overruled. "Answer the question, Mr. Davenport," Judge Chen commanded. "Yes," he whispered, his credibility shattering. For 2 days, Jessica exposed his lies, presenting evidence of lavish gifts and trips with Isabella, all paid for with community funds. His narrative of a man escaping a bad marriage was replaced by the reality of a greedy man plotting to defraud his wife. Calling Isabella Rossi to the stand proved a catastrophic error for the defense. She entered with an air of smug superiority, but Jessica's questions quickly unraveled her. "Miss Rossi," Jessica began, "you stated you and Mr. Davenport had a meeting of minds. When did this intellectual connection become a physical one? I don't see how that's relevant." Isabella snapped. "It's very relevant, Miss Rossi," Jessica countered, "because Mr. Davenport was a married man. His wife, the woman sitting right there, was at home while you were having a meeting of minds with him at five-star resorts on the company's dime. You took the word of a man who was actively cheating on and lying to his wife, and you expect this court to find you credible." Isabella crumbled her testimony, painting her not as a partner in a great love story, but as a remorseless, willing accomplice to the deception. Finally, Catherine took the stand. With quiet dignity, she told her story of love, trust, and devastating betrayal. When Thorne tried to belittle her contributions, she responded with unshakable grace. "I was not a corporate executive, Mr. Thorne," she said calmly. "I was a wife. I trusted my husband. I now know that my trust was my greatest mistake." Her quiet strength was more powerful than any of Michael's blustering denials. In her closing argument, Jessica tied it all together. She summarized the overwhelming evidence of fraud and then turned to the human cost. For 7 years, Catherine Davenport devoted her life to Michael Davenport. She provided the foundation upon which he built his empire. When he was done with her, he tried to cast her aside. When she became pregnant with his child, he used that child as a weapon. She looked directly at Judge Chen. "Your Honor, in cases of egregious fraud where one party has deliberately and maliciously hidden assets, the court has the discretion to award more than 50% to the injured party. He has shown nothing but contempt for his wife, his unborn child, and this court. We ask you to send a message that a marriage is a partnership and a wife cannot be treated like a disposable asset." 3 agonizing days later, the courtroom reassembled for the verdict. The tension was palpable. Michael sat stone-faced. Judge Chen entered and began to read her judgment. She spoke for nearly an hour, her tone severe. She found Michael's testimony wholly lacking in credibility and his financial dealings a clear and convincing case of fraud, oppression, and malice. Then she arrived at the division of assets. Given Mr. Davenport's egregious breach of his fiduciary duty, she said, her gaze fixed on Michael, a simple 50-50 split would not be just. It would in fact reward Mr. Davenport for his deceit. She paused, the courtroom holding its breath. Therefore, the court orders the community property estate, valued at approximately $450 million, shall be divided as follows: 80% to the petitioner, Catherine Davenport, 20% to the respondent, Michael Davenport. A collective gasp swept the room. 80%. It was an astonishing figure. Michael's face contorted in disbelief and rage, but the judge was not done. Furthermore, she continued, her voice like steel, the court finds that the entity known as Project Chimera was created using community assets and is therefore 100% community property. The entirety of that asset, valued at $200 million, is hereby awarded to Catherine Davenport. She went on, awarding Catherine the Atherton Mansion, the Napa Vineyard, and the Aspen Lodge. She granted her sole legal and physical custody of their child, with Michael receiving only supervised visitation contingent on completing anger management. To conclude, she ordered Michael to pay all of Catherine's considerable legal fees plus an additional $10 million in punitive damages. It was a complete and stunning victory. Catherine sat in silence, tears of relief finally streaming down her face as Jessica squeezed her hand. Across the room, Michael Davenport, the titan of tech, looked utterly destroyed, a king, dethroned in his own court. Justice had been served. This wasn't just a divorce, it was a revolution. Catherine Davenport, the woman he tried to erase, walked away, not with scraps, but with the keys to the kingdom. She proved that integrity and truth can be the most powerful assets of all. Her story is a testament to the incredible strength of a woman scorned, a mother determined to protect her child, and a powerful reminder that no amount of money or power can place you above the law. It's a story of justice, resilience, and the sweet, sweet taste of vindication. What did you think of this incredible story? Do you think the judge made the right call? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you were inspired by Catherine's fight for justice, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more unbelievable true stories. Click that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching.